What is Aikido? The name Aikido is pretty straightforward. Aikido is the way to practice Aiki. This leaves us with a burning question. What is Aiki? Many arguments have been made to where the term Aiki comes from. Some say that it's a fashionable word made up by Onosaburo Taguchi and used by Sokaku Takeda and Morahi Ueshiba to name their martial arts systems. Others believe that Aiki is an old term that Ueshiba took from his teacher, Sokaku Takeda, the term being used since perhaps the 11th century. In trying to understand what Aiki means to the practice of Aikido, we may want to look to the old sources in order to get a handle on what Aiki is. However, it would be much more convenient if the founder simply told us what he meant by Aiki. Unfortunately, exactly what the founder thought Aiki was can sound a bit metaphysical at times. In Kishomaru Ueshiba's book, Aikido, under the section Words of the Founder, Ueshiba is quoted as saying, "Although the word Aiki is an old one, the word as it was used by the warriors of the past is fundamentally different than mine." From this, we can realize that if we want to understand what Aiki meant to the founder, we don't need to look at earlier usages of the word, because he means something different from the word than Aiki meant by his predecessors. Ueshiba then goes on further to say, Aikido is not a technique to fight with or defeat the enemy. It is a way to reconcile the world and make human beings one family. This first part is very clear as to what he thinks Aiki is not. It's not the same as his predecessors would use the word. This makes it clear that however the term was used before isn't what his system Aikido is about. The second part might at first sound a bit metaphysical. However, I believe it can be read directly, and in this video I'm going to show you how. How I was told Aiki is made. When I first started studying Aikido, my teacher provided a 4-step process used to make Aiki. The 4-step process consisted of Kokyu, Musubi, Awase, and Zanshin. To put this simply, the process of making Aiki, as I was taught, consists of composing yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, in order to understand another person. Then you are going to energetically connect to that person and empathetically understand them. Next, you're going to coordinate your actions with their actions. And then you're going to stay vigilant so that Aiki doesn't fall apart. If we look at this as a way to possibly make Aiki, we can start to ask, what would we make Aiki for and how would that look? As students of the martial arts, we might want to say we want to use Aiki to win a fight. But remember, Ueshiba said that Aiki is not a technique to fight with or defeat the enemy. So how else could we use this process of making Aiki? Let me share some work I've been doing with you and maybe we can shed some light on what Ueshiba might have meant. There's a tool I created a few years back when teaching a self-defense class. I call this tool the ladder of relationship. It's a simple tool that gives visual aid to how relationships become positive or negative. The first rung of this ladder is called stranger. This is where we start with anyone when we meet them the first time. If this interaction goes well, we would move that person up to someone we like. If that goes even better, and over a period of time, we might become friends with that person. After a long relationship, that person would become someone who's like family. We would say we love them. Of course, this ladder works the other way as well. If we met someone and didn't like them, we would say we dislike this person. If they presented themselves even worse, we might say we have contempt for them, actively hoping things go bad for them. If it continues in a negative direction, then we would get aggressive toward them, and physical violence might even start to happen. Originally, I used this tool to explain to self-defense students why de-escalation and empathetic understanding are an important part of self-defense. Recently, however, I put this tool together with what I call my spectrum of conflict and discovered an even more powerful tool. This new chart can help us see that when a relationship becomes emotionally very negative, it may very well become physical. The physical side of this also having stages, the first 3 distancing, the next 3 levels of connection, and the last 2 limiting physical mobility. By putting these 2 charts together, we can get a pretty complete picture of both the escalation and de-escalation of conflict. We can see what entrenches us more deeply in conflict and what moves us away from conflict. We can then use this chart to explore what martial arts systems are trying to do, what stages they work on, and whether they are moving up or down the chart. For example, if we look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we can see that the whole objective of the system is to move down the chart. The goal is to force the conflict into later stages in order to limit the options of the other party. In fact, we will find that most systems attempt to draw the conflict down into a stage where they develop skills to dominate. Does Aikido do the same thing? We could speculate that it does. We could look at the pins found at the end of the forms and say that Aikido uses the same strategy as most other systems, to bring the other party down to a place where we can dominate them with pins and throws. I would, however, like to suggest a different idea, that Aikido is a very rare system in that it always wants to go up the ladder, ideally solving the conflict in the emotional stages and making a friend out of an enemy. If you think of most martial arts systems, they work by teaching students to force the person into an area of conflict where they are able to easily defeat that person. I'm suggesting that Aikido is trying to much more directly solve the problem by making a friend out of a former enemy. This is why Aikido is not about fighting or defeating an enemy as Ueshiba consistently states, but instead Aikido is a process of removing yourself from dangerous situations in order to resolve the situation by making peace with the opposition. This represents a revolutionary way of looking at martial arts systems. A problem I see in working with conflict theory today is that we don't have any methods of bridging the gap between emotional conflict and physical conflict. Conflict resolution tends to have 2 major camps of thought. One is about feelings, love, and joy. The other is about guns and fists. This leads us to create a false dichotomy, where we believe conflict resolution is about this or that, when in truth, these 2 exist on the same continuum. What if we had a martial arts system that could bridge the gap between those 2? I believe Ueshiba gave us exactly that in his system of Aikido. Of course, this is all conjecture. However, for me, this interpretation not only fits with everything I've read from the founder in his later life, it also has the potential to be a totally different kind of martial arts system. As I move forward working on my own system, this is the route I'll be taking. Thank you for listening. I'm Christopher Hein.